The fluorescent lights of the coffee shop hummed a flat, monotonous tune that seemed to sync perfectly with the sinking feeling in my stomach. I stared at the young man across from me, his face a mask of practiced apology that didn't quite reach his eyes. His name was Chad, and he was maybe 27, dressed in the uniform of the modern tech entrepreneur, a branded Patagonia vest over a crisp t-shirt, his hair artfully messy. "Linda, your portfolio is incredible, truly," he said, spreading his hands wide as if to show he was holding nothing back. "The campaign work you did for Global Nexus in the early 2000s. Legendary stuff. We're talking foundational work for the entire industry." I forced a smile, my fingers tightening around the warm ceramic of my latte mug. I knew but was coming. It was always coming. At 58, I'd become an expert in hearing the but before it was even spoken. "But," Chad continued, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial tone that was meant to soften the blow, "we're building a very specific culture at Apex Dynamics. It's fast-paced, agile. We're targeting a Gen Z and millennial demographic. We need to speak their language, live and breathe their digital ecosystem." He paused, taking a sip of his cold brew. "To be brutally honest, Linda, we're concerned that someone of your generation might not be the right cultural fit. You're a superstar, but you're just too old for what we're building here." The words landed like physical blows. Too old. They hung in the air between us, stark and humiliating. It wasn't the first time I'd heard a variation of this, but the directness, the casual cruelty of it, stole my breath. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, a mixture of shame and white-hot anger. I, Linda Croft, who had helped pioneer digital marketing before this kid even knew what dial-up was. "I see," I managed, my voice unnaturally calm. "Well, thank you for your candor, Chad." I gathered my leather portfolio, a gift to myself for my 40th birthday, and stood up, my knees protesting slightly. I refused to let him see any physical sign of the age he'd just condemned. I walked out of that coffee shop into the bright, indifferent San Francisco sunlight, the weight of his words pressing down on me. The rest of the day was a blur of dejection. My apartment, once a source of pride, now felt like a museum of a life that was over. The framed awards on the wall, the shelves of business books, they were all relics. The world had moved on, and it had decided it didn't have a place for me. I'd been a powerhouse creative director for over 3 decades, a single mother who had poured her soul into her career to provide for her daughter, Emily. Now, Emily was grown, a successful lawyer in New York, and I was obsolete. For weeks, the rejection festered. I went through the motions of applying for other jobs, but my heart wasn't in it. Chad's words had become a toxic mantra in my head. Too old, too old, too old. My confidence, once my most valuable asset, was in shambles. My friends suggested I take up gardening or finally go on that cruise, but the thought of a life of quiet retirement felt like a death sentence. It was during one of these low moments, while aimlessly scrolling through YouTube, that I stumbled upon it. A video from a channel I'd never seen before. A young woman, probably in her late 20s, was speaking with passionate intensity to the camera. The title of the video was, "The Untapped Goldmine Everyone is Ignoring, the 55-Plus Digital Consumer." Intrigued, and more than a little skeptical, I clicked. The creator, a sharp woman named Maya, laid out a compelling argument. She talked about how every brand was obsessed with the 18 to 35 demographic, a market that was saturated, fickle, and ad-blind. Then she shifted gears. But there's a massive, loyal, and incredibly wealthy demographic that is being almost completely ignored by digital marketers, baby boomers and General X. They control over 70% of the country's disposable income. They're online, they're shopping, and they're frustrated because no one is speaking to them. No one is designing user experiences for them. They feel invisible. It was like she was speaking directly to me. I felt a jolt, a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months, professional interest. I spent the next 3 days falling down a rabbit hole. I watched every one of Maya's videos. I read every article and study I could find. The data was undeniable. This wasn't a niche, it was a frontier. And every major agency, every disruptive startup like Apex Dynamics, was blind to it because they were all run by people like Chad, people who thought the world ended at 40. One evening, fueled by a strange new energy and a second cup of coffee, I did something impulsive. I opened my laptop and started a YouTube channel. I called it, The Prime Consumer. My hands trembled as I set it up. Who was I to start a channel? I was too old for this, wasn't I? But then I remembered Chad's dismissive face, and I typed with renewed determination. My first video was terrifying. I sat at my simple desk, my webcam feeling like a judgmental eye. I introduced myself. Hi, I'm Linda Croft. I've been in marketing and advertising for over 35 years. And I'm here to tell you that the most powerful, overlooked, and misunderstood consumer in the world is us. I gestured to the camera. The people who remember life before the internet, who built careers, raised families, and now have the time, money, and desire to engage with the world in a new way. And brands are failing us. I talked about bad website design with tiny fonts and confusing navigation. I talked about ads that either patronized older people or excluded them entirely. I talked about the sheer economic power this demographic wielded and how targeting them wasn't just a moral imperative, it was a brilliant business strategy. I edited the video myself, a steep learning curve that involved swearing at editing software for hours. When it was done, I took a deep breath and hit publish. I didn't tell anyone, not even Emily. I felt silly, a 58-year-old woman, a former executive, trying to become a YouTuber. It was absurd. For the first week, the video got 17 views. Probably all bots. The disappointment was acute. Maybe Chad was right. Maybe my time had passed. Then, something shifted. A comment appeared. It was from a woman named Barbara. "Thank you for saying this," she wrote. "I thought I was going crazy. I tried to buy a new tablet online last week and the website was so confusing I gave up and went to the library instead." Another comment came, then another. People were sharing their own stories of frustration. They felt seen. They felt heard. My subscriber count ticked up from 0 to 10, then 50, then 100. I made more videos. 3 website fails that are costing you millions in senior sales. Why, grandma, is the most valuable keyword you're not bidding on. An open letter to tech CEOs, your ageism is bad for business. With each video, my confidence grew. My on-camera presence became more natural. I was doing what I did best. Analyzing a market, understanding a consumer, and communicating a strategy. Only this time, I was my own boss, and my platform was YouTube. About 2 months in, the completely unexpected happened. I was filming a video about accessibility in app design when my phone buzzed with an email. The subject line made my heart stop. Interview request, The Ellen Fisher Show. My first thought was that it was spam. Ellen Fisher was a legendary talk show host, a Oprah-like figure whose endorsement could launch brands and change careers. There was no way her producers had found my little channel. But the email was real. It was from a senior producer. She wrote that Ellen herself was a fan of the channel, having discovered it through a friend, and she loved the message of challenging age-based stereotypes. They wanted me on the show to talk about the prime consumer and my journey. I remember reading that email over and over, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I called Emily, my words tumbling out in an excited, incoherent rush. She screamed with joy on the other end of the line. The next week was a whirlwind of preparation. A stylist came to my apartment to pick an outfit. I was pre-interviewed by 3 different producers. I flew to Los Angeles, a car whisking me from the airport to the famous studio. It felt surreal. Just a few months ago, I'd been told I was too old for a junior-level marketing job. Now I was sitting in the green room of one of the most popular shows on television. When I walked out onto that iconic stage, the audience applause was a physical wave of sound. Ellen, warm and genuine, greeted me with a hug. "Linda," she began, after we were seated, "your story is incredible. You had a decades-long, brilliant career, and you were told you were too old. Instead of giving up, you started a YouTube channel from your living room. And you've uncovered this massive blind spot in the business world. Tell us about that." For the next 15 minutes, I spoke. I talked about Chad, about the sting of ageism, about the data I'd discovered, and about the incredible community that had formed around my channel. I spoke with a passion and clarity I hadn't felt in years. The audience was with me every step of the way, laughing, nodding, applauding. Then Ellen did what Ellen does best. She delivered the unexpected. "So, Linda," she said, leaning forward. "You've proven that this demographic is powerful. You've built a community, but what if you could do more? What if you could build a company that helps brands actually reach this demographic effectively?" I nodded, my mind racing. "That's the dream, Ellen. To move beyond just talking about the problem and start building the solutions." She smiled, that famous, knowing smile. "Well, as you know, we have a segment on the show called Ellen's Dream Fund, where we help amazing people launch or grow their businesses." My breath caught in my throat. This couldn't be happening. Linda Croft, Ellen said, turning to the audience and then back to me. On behalf of Ellen's Dream Fund, we would like to give you a seed investment of $100,000 to start your own consulting firm, Prime Consumer Consulting. The world stopped. The sound of the audience erupted, but it was a distant roar. A giant check was wheeled out. $100,000. I was crying, laughing, trying to form a thank you that could never be enough. It was more than the money. It was validation. It was a door being blown wide open after I'd been told it was permanently locked. The aftermath of the show was a tidal wave of attention. My YouTube subscriber count exploded into the hundreds of thousands. My inbox was flooded with emails, not just from viewers, but from CEOs, from venture capitalists, from brands that had seen the show and finally understood the opportunity they were missing. I used Ellen's investment to rent a small, bright office and hire a small, crack team, a mix of sharp young digital natives and, intentionally, a few brilliant minds from my own generation who had also been sidelined. We became the go-to consultants for brands that wanted to do better. We redesigned websites for major retailers, advised tech startups on inclusive design, and created advertising campaigns that featured older people not as doddering caricatures, but as vibrant, active, and tech-savvy consumers. About a year after the Ellen show aired, my receptionist buzzed my desk. "Linda, there's a Chad Wilson here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." I felt a cold calm settle over me. "Send him in." Chad looked different. The casual arrogance was gone, replaced by a nervous energy. The Patagonia vest was there, but it looked rumpled. He sat down across from me, in an office that was now my domain. "Linda," he began, his voice tight. "Your success is incredible. Truly inspiring." "Thank you, Chad," I said, my tone neutral. He cleared his throat. "Apex Dynamics, we've hit a wall. Our growth has plateaued. Our investor board is pushing us to find new market segments, and they've mandated that we find a way to capture the mature consumer." He could barely get the words out. "They said we need to hire you. We need your firm to do a complete overhaul of our marketing and user experience." The irony was so rich it was almost poetic. The man who had told me I was too old for his company was now being forced to come to me, hat in hand, to save it. I looked at him, this boy who had once held my livelihood in his hands and dismissed it so carelessly. I felt no anger anymore, only a profound sense of closure. "Chad," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "I appreciate you coming in. My team and I have a very full portfolio right now, as you can imagine. But we do have a consulting package that might suit your needs. It's our premium tier. It's quite intensive, and I have to warn you." I paused, letting the moment hang in the air, "It's not cheap. But then again, accessing a multi-trillion-dollar demographic rarely is." He nodded eagerly, relief washing over his face that I was even considering it. "Of course. Money is no object. We need your expertise." I stood up, signaling the end of our meeting. "Good. My chief of staff will send over the contract. We'll need full access to your data, your creative teams, everything. We don't do things by half measures here." He shook my hand, his grip damp. "Thank you, Linda. Thank you for this opportunity." After he left, I walked over to my window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. The city that had rejected me was now laid out below, full of possibility. Chad had seen my age as a liability, an expiration date. But he was wrong. My age was my expertise. My lived experience was the very insight the market had been missing. Being told I was too old was the worst thing that could have happened to my career, but it was also the best. It forced me to stop asking for a seat at someone else's table and to build my own. And as it turned out, the view from here was so much better.